I know I've mentioned my favorite fountain pen a lot on this channel, but I thought it was about time that I tell you why I love this pen so much. This is the Kaweco AL Sport in gold, and I am absolutely in love with this pen. This is like my ideal fountain pen. As part of my review a bit later in the video, I'm going to ink it up with one of these Diamine Blue Velvet cartridges. This is from their 150th anniversary celebration, and so stick around for some journaling and writing samples. Kaweco AL Sport is kind of a premium upgraded version of the plastic Kaweco Sport, which is one of the most popular fountain pens in the world. It's made out of aluminum, so it's a little bit heavier than the plastic ones, but not as heavy as the brass edition of this pen. The gold in particular, I especially love because it is very, very smooth and satiny feeling. It is absolutely a delight to hold. On mine, I added on the optional N-style chrome clip so that I could attach it to things. And you can see that it matches the chrome or silver finial and the nib, which is a medium on mine. The nibs are steel and super tiny and really cute. They're a little bit inconsistent. I have a variety of them and they all feel kind of different, even just within medium. But I happen to really like the nib that came on this particular gold one, and so that contributes to why it is my favorite. My introduction to the Kaweco Sport was with this plastic Kaweco collection, dark olive, and while I really loved the shape and the color of this, I found that it was a little bit too lightweight, and it also came with a fine nib, which I wasn't as into, so upgrading to the aluminum and getting a medium nib on the gold, I think really solidified it for me. That kind of took away all of the issues that I had with the less expensive, lighter weight, less durable Kaweco Sport. With that said, I still really like the plastic ones, especially once I add medium nibs onto them. It is pretty easy to change the nibs on these, so if you don't like a nib that you're working with, you can definitely buy replacements, and that is a big plus. I just really happen to enjoy the weight of this, the feel of this, and the sound it makes when you open and close it. It's just a really delightful experience, especially if you happen to get a really good nib on it. I was also considering buying the brass one, and what turned me off of that particular model was people reporting that it's made your hands smell like pennies, which is not a thing that I particularly enjoy, and also the brass one is considerably heavier. I like that this one is heavier than the plastic, but not super heavy. And it doesn't have a noticeable smell, at least to me, so big plus. Another reason why I love this pen is that it's a mini fountain pen. So here is a TWSBI Eco in comparison. The nib is larger on the Eco, obviously. The Kaweco AL Sport is really portable as a result, but when you're writing with it, you can post the cap on the back, which results in it basically becoming the exact size and shape that I like for my particular hand. It was like this pen was made for me, and as soon as I started using it, I knew it was worth the extra money. Here's another size and shape comparison, this time with the Pilot Metropolitan, which is a less expensive fountain pen and a very common beginner fountain pen. And you can see that when you post the cap on the Kaweco AL Sport, which is how I prefer to write with it, it's a little bit larger than the Pilot Metropolitan without the cap posted on it. You can post the cap on the Pilot Metropolitan to make it longer, but I don't typically write with it that way. I also love that there isn't much of a bump on the threads on the Kaweco AL Sport. The Pilot Metropolitan's a little bit uncomfortable for me in that spot. So here are the other two colors that I have this particular pen in. I'll show you the differences. The one on the top is the stonewashed black, and it came a little bit aged and beat up like this, which I think is really cool. And then the one on the bottom is the limited edition vibrant violet, which has more of a matte texture. It's a little bit gritty, and then the stonewashed black is not quite as gritty as the purple one, but it is not as smooth as the gold one. It's kind of in between. I put a gold clip on the violet one and then left the stonewashed black without a clip, and I'll show you the nibs on these. They have different ones. So these are both steel nibs, both mediums, but you can see that the stonewashed black comes with a chrome finish and the vibrant violet comes with a gold finish, which is actually my favorite of the nibs. And it was a replacement nib from Jet Pens. It wasn't even the nib that originally came on the pen. So I would someday, when I have the money, Love to get a real gold nib because they sell them separately and put it on that stone-washed black. Let me know if that's a thing that you have done before because I'm very curious. Here are two more of the plastic ones that I have. The top is the Bordeaux with the gold colored trimming, and then the one on the bottom is one of the limited editions in cyan with the chrome trimming. But to be fair, my favorite of the plastic ones I own is still the iridescent pearl, which is one of the limited editions. It is so pretty and so cool. I have a separate review video about that one if you are interested in hearing more. Overall, I reach for the aluminum ones a lot more often than I reach for the plastic ones, but if I were traveling or going somewhere where I could potentially lose a pen, it's really nice to have the very lightweight and less expensive Kaweco Sport, the plastic ones, to have as an option. Regardless of the material, I love the shape of this pen. I love how compact and portable it is, and it is just really adorable. They also pick really good colors. But at the moment, as I have said, this gold one is my absolute favorite and I love it. So with the Kaweco AL Sport, they do make a converter for this pen, but it is very small and I've seen mixed reviews on it. So for these particular pens, I like to use cartridges, and they are short international cartridges. So you have access to a lot of Diamine inks and a bunch of other companies that also make international short cartridges. This is Blue Velvet, which is from Diamine's 150th anniversary ink collection. I wasn't sure how long this collection was going to be around, so I just kind of picked a bunch that looked cool to me, and so this is the first time I am trying out this particular ink. If you are new to fountain pens, cartridges are a really easy way to kind of figure out how they work, and so all you have to do is take the back section off of the pen by unscrewing it, and then you just take your cartridge and pop it right in there. And for most of the pens that I've used, you can kind of feel when it breaks the seal on the cartridge and lets the ink go in. And now we wait. One major pro of using cartridges is that it's less messy than using bottled inks, but a con is that it takes a while for the ink to get through the feed, and so I put the pen upside down with the cap on in a cup or a jar like this, and I just give it some time, and eventually it starts to write. So now I'm getting out my Swatch Book, which I have a charm on here from East End Alchemy on Etsy, and the cover is a Chic Sparrow Austin Emma pocket size with pockets. And if you use my code Lauren Fairweather on cheeksparrow.com, you can get 10% off of your order, and I get a commission from those sales, which is great because I like spending money on stationery to share with you. I also, you can see on the pages, this is Tomoe River paper, and I use a stamp from Everyday Explorers Co., which gives me a really lovely little box where I can put my swatch and write the brand and color of each ink. This pen unscrews to open, and then you just have to push to post the cap. The cap doesn't screw on the back end of the pen like some of my pens do. And sometimes it takes a couple tries to get the ink flowing when you're using a cartridge. In this case, it just kind of started after I let gravity do its work. And then when I use a cartridge, I use a cotton swab to dab the breather hole on the nib, and that's how I fill up this little swatch box here. It's also a way to do this that wastes less ink than dipping a swab into maybe a bottle of ink, for example. So that's something that I try to do whenever I can, if the pen will allow me to do it. So when I started writing with this particular ink, the first thing that I noticed is that it is coming out lighter than on the swatch that Jet Pens had on their website that I kind of worked off of to buy this ink. I was expecting more of a really rich kind of dark blue, but a very saturated one, and what I'm getting is more of a kind of a lighter royal blue in a very bright way. It almost reminds me of like an American flag. It's very, very blue, and yeah, it's fine. It's just not exactly what I was expecting. Now, one thing that I've learned and noticed from using a bunch of different fountain pens with different nib sizes is that the finer the nib is, the lighter the ink comes out. So maybe I just need to try this ink on like a really, like maybe a broad nib pen or something like that, where when more ink is allowed to come out, it becomes more saturated and therefore darker. But I was expecting to get a little bit of shading with this ink, and it seems like I am. It seems like there is a little bit of shading in this ink. And it feels nice and smooth, especially with this pen, which I knew already was a really great writer, so that hasn't changed. Sometimes the right or wrong ink can make or break the way a pen writes, and this one feels just fine. It's maybe just not one of my favorite colors in the world. The other thing that can make an ink look lighter when you first start writing with it is whether or not you still have a little bit of water in the feed from when you cleaned it out. And I had just cleaned this pen out probably the day before when I switched it from the ink that was in it the last time. So what I'll do in that case is just go on ahead and write a couple pages with it and see if it darkens up at all. Which is something I like to do anyway because I find that just scribbling doesn't really give you a very good idea of what an ink color looks like in a paragraph, which is how I typically write my journals. I want to know what an ink is going to look like when I'm using it for real, not when I'm just scribbling and making a swatch for it. So to do that, I'm going to pull out my A6 size Cafe Note, Nanami Cafe Note. This is in a Chic Sparrow cover as well, also an Austin collection leather, but this is a folio in the Darcy color. And I've got my other Kaweco AL Sport here, the Vibrant Violet. I'm going to do a couple other little things on the page using another color of ink. It's one reason why I like to have a bunch of these pens around, because I can ink them up with different ink colors or have different nib sizes, and then I can have a variety of things to pull from because it is a process to change the ink in these. And you can see that the grid on this notebook is very tiny. It's a 3.7 millimeter grid, I believe, so if that helps you to see how broad the medium nib is on these pens, then there you go. The ink I have in the other Kaweco is the J. Herbin Poussiere de Lune, which is a lovely dark desaturated purple or violet color, and it is a very, very smooth ink. I love to write with that ink, and that pen in particular. Oh, it's just such a nice combination. That ink also comes in short international cartridges, which is really convenient, but I think it comes with only 6 cartridges to a package, and I believe the Diamine one came with 20, so you know, I think I'm honestly going to buy more of the J. Herbin ones because I really have liked all the ones I've tried so far. So when I'm testing out a new ink and pen combination, I like to write in both print and in cursive, so I alternate and try both. And the reason why that is that if there are shading properties to an ink, it shades differently depending on the way that you're writing. And so I find that the ink pools on the kind of the end of every letter when you're printing, but when you are writing in cursive, you don't lift up the pen as often, so it pulls kind of at the end of the word and sometimes the beginning of the word as well. Depends on the pen, depends on the ink and your handwriting and all that stuff. But I think it's so cool to see how different it looks. I find that it comes out darker when I'm printing, and then when I'm writing in cursive, most of the word is lighter and there is less shading overall because you're not picking up the pen as often. I really, really like shading inks, and I think the reason why that is that I don't really experience that with any other type of pen. It's something that is unique to fountain pens, at least pens that I've found, and I think it's really very charming and beautiful when you get a variety of colors or shades just from writing with the same ink and the same pen. And while I did kind of have high hopes for this ink darkening up as I wrote with it more, I found that it pretty much stayed true to my initial experience with it, which is that it wasn't really what I was expecting, but it writes really nicely, and I'm sure there will come a time when I'm in the mood for this sort of blue. I do tend to prefer blues that are a little bit more muted and darker, and so, you know, part of this whole fountain pen experience for me is trying out new things, and I'm not gonna immediately love every ink color and every pen that I try, and it's just the way things are, and I just enjoy the process. I enjoy the adventure of finding out when I try a new ink for the first time, ooh, do I like this? And honestly, after I bought this particular set of cartridges is when I started buying ink samples more often. So sites like Yoseka and Goulet Pens will package up small little bits, only a couple of milliliters of different ink colors, so you can try them out before you commit to buying a whole package of 20 cartridges. So just to show you a comparison with some of the other bright blue inks that I have, the first one that kind of jumped into my head was the Pilot Iroshizuku Konpeki, which is a very popular bright blue ink, which is also a little bit too bright for me. And that one, you can see when you put them side by side here, that one is a little bit more of like a swimming pool blue. It reminds me of the summer. And I don't use that one as often as I thought I would, but it was also one of the first bottles of fountain pen ink that I ever purchased. So at that point, I didn't really know what I wanted or what I liked. And then when I was flipping through here, I came across the Private Reserve Black Magic Blue, which is one that I got in a sample set from Goulet Pens. And honestly, this is what I was expecting Blue Velvet to look like. A little bit darker, some really intense dark shading. And so I think I should probably try that one next. In general, regardless of the ink that is in this pen, I really, really enjoy writing with it, and I am so glad that I decided to make a pretty big jump in price to see if this was something that I would like more than the plastic ones. This honestly is a fountain pen that, in my head, competes with every other fountain pen that I buy. I do like to have a variety, so I don't regret that I have purchased other fountain pens, but this is one that I always go back to, that I always am happy to ink up with some new color, and I don't know, I am really just very pleased with this particular pen. I would love to hear from you folks now in the comments below. I always love to chat with you after one of these videos goes up. So if you have purchased fountain pens from Kaweco, what is your favorite model? Which colors do you gravitate towards? Do you prefer the plastic ones? Do you prefer the aluminum ones? Have you tried the elusive brass one that I keep hearing about and was just kind of too intimidated to try? And if you have purchased their gold nib, like the real gold nib, and put it on one of these pens, how did it turn out for you? Because I am really considering it. If you would like to see more individual fountain pen reviews, check out my fountain pen collection video and let me know which of those you would like to see a dedicated review video on next. This one was a given, just because I love it so much. I hope you're having a good day, and I will see you next time.